Here at CreateFuture, we help teams using design thinking. And often it can be a brand, a marketing, or a product challenge that we're working on. The challenges we work on are thankfully very varied, but two things almost always exist. A company usually has a vision, and there are internal teams who are charged with making something. But getting teams to pull in the same direction can be tricky, especially as the teams that we work with are often quite large and often distributed in different locations around the UK or even around the globe. I always say that there should be a steel thread that runs between the company vision and the teams that are designing those products or the experiences. And everyone should know why they're doing it and be able to tell you. And a great way to create that steel thread are principles. So what are principles and why do they exist? Well, if you imagine a triangle, at the top is your company vision. In the middle is the experience that's driving you towards the vision. And the bottom is what you're making. So this is what you're designing. In between each of those three things, there are two layers, and these are your principles. So what you're designing needs design principles, and those design principles connect the design to the experience. And above the experience, you have experience principles that connect the experience you're creating to the vision. Make sense? So why or how do you create these? Well, the best way to create them is that the team themselves have to make them, and the leadership have to agree to them. Lots of organizations have principles that are effectively useless. They're there for vanity reasons. They're too soft. They can't really be used in anger. They can't be used to make decisions. So there's four things I think make up good principles. Number one is that your principles should be memorable. If it's full of business jargon and talk and they're too long, nobody's ever going to be able to bring them up in discussion. A good principle should allow you to say no. It should allow you to say, well, we shouldn't make that decision in the design, or we shouldn't do this with our experience, because otherwise we're not doing what we said in our principles. So they should be quite specific in that case. But a little bit like Goldilocks and her bed that's too soft or too hard, you also want them good principles to be broadly applicable. So not too specific, but not too broad. Ones that are in between. If you're looking for things that are more broadly applicable, a nice way to think of this is even or statements, even over. So we care about people over profits. We care about getting people to the answer quicker than showing them advertising. And a final one out of the four would be that good principles aren't truisms. So there's no point in having a principle which anyone could say, or which the opposite of couldn't be true. So a principle that says we help the user, well, is the opposite we wouldn't help the user? So how do you create principles which the language is tight enough that you can use them in a meeting? Is a nice way to think of it. Then when you have your principles, you want to get them into your everyday lexicon and your everyday ways of working. A useful way to do this is to think about somebody joining your team and the first 3 months that they're in the organization. So how do you use principles to set the expectations that you have of them, to inform them about how the practical things that they're doing are driving towards the company vision? Then as they start to embed in the team, how are they being used to review the work that they're creating? And even for them, if they're in a meeting, how can they use those principles to have a language, a lexicon, to have a constructive discussion with their team members, and especially with senior leaders? And then finally, after 3 months and they're having their review, great principles can be used to say whether or not they are fitting in with the team and whether they are starting to drive the business forward and moving towards a vision. I'm in no way saying the principles are easy to make, and they also should be specific and unique to your organization, because hopefully your organization's vision and your product are unique to you. But if I can leave you with one thing, it's start from the heart of it, get the team to build them together, and make sure that you're constantly looking at them and seeing whether they are being used on a daily basis. And if you need any help, give us a call. More than happy to chat.